Hi, I'm Betty McClellan. In this fourth interview with Pauline Woodbridge, coordinator of the North Queensland Domestic Violence Resource Service situated in Townsville on Australia's northeast coast, my questions are going to focus on the history and day-to-day operation of the service that Pauline has headed up since its beginning in 1994. Pauline, you have been coordinator of the service since it began 20 years ago, and the word is, in Townsville, around the state, in fact around the country, that the North Queensland Domestic Violence Resource Service is really a happening place. In a moment, I want to ask you to give us a bit of the history and tell us what it was like in those early days, but first, it would be interesting to hear about your own journey and what led you to make the decision to apply for the position of coordinator.
It's an amazing opportunity to be able to look back to more than 20 years ago. And I've worked in DV for 30 years, so those first 10 years were involved with the other domestic violence or feminist services here in Townsville. So I worked at the Women's Centre, which at the time was a feminist collective. A very precious memory, I think, or a very precious issue in time, to think that we did work very hard on having collective processes and that many of the original women's services were based on that kind of collective process. Very rare now though. But so yes, I did have the experience of a feminist collective at the Women's Centre and worked there for about 7 years. But in the middle of that 7 years, I went off and worked at the Women's Shelter, and that's also a feminist sister organisation here, and worked with the clients in the accommodation program. So I got quite a broad experience really around different positions, I suppose, amongst those two services. And so when the funding came forward and CAITH, the Coalition on Criminal Assault in the Home, who had been very active in our community around domestic violence issues, had made the decision to apply for the funds, were successful in receiving the funds for the Townsville Regional Domestic Violence Service. I was already very knowledgeable, I think, in a lot of things around the effects of domestic violence on women and children, and so started to see the possibility that I could work at this new service. I did apply for the job, and I'm sure many people did apply for the position. It was an exciting time of development, and that it took the committee an awfully long time to make up their mind, because it was always going to be that the new Regional Domestic Violence Service would also work with men. I think the interview panel had some concerns about my background of only working in women's services, especially the Women's Centre, which is a women's only space, and it's very much a strong philosophy for them. And so the interview did cover a lot of information about how would I go with working with men, what would I set up, what would I envision that we could do. It took them a long time to make the decision, and I do remember that strange feeling of still working at the Women's Centre but not knowing, was there going to be rejection, thanks but no thanks, and then the day came when they said they would like to offer me the position. I was told later that it was the idea about whether I could transition into a generalised sort of service, but the outcome actually was that the DV service is a feminist service that works with men and who employs men and who has men on our management committee, but always from a feminist analysis.
Okay, Pauline. Now, I know that the service actually started in 1994 with 4 workers doing crisis counselling, emergency counselling. Tell me what it's like today. I know you have a much bigger staff than 4. So tell me what it's like. Give us a picture of how the service has grown to meet demand.
The description of grown is absolutely accurate, because my memories of being told that I had the job and nothing existed, no service existed, and so I had my own car, I had a milk crate full of odds and ends and bits of paper, and I actually called in favours with the different organisations that I had relationships with about, can I pop in here and use your phone so I can try and find a new premises for the new organisation? So certainly when we look at where we are now, growth has definitely been a steady changing path that the Domestic Violence Service has been on. So over time, from starting with those 4 workers, and we established ourselves in an office, we really did establish things like our philosophies, our policies and procedures, and all of those things that go with setting up a new service. But they really set the scene, and they still work for us today. So the things that we held dear and that were very important to us around our feminist analysis of domestic violence are articulated in those documents, and they still guide us today. But they guide far more of us now. We have a staff team now that provide tremendous work around a whole range of different programs. So we're able to work with children who are victims of or live in a family where there's domestic violence. And very often that relationship between the children and their mother is destroyed by the violence that they're experiencing. We work also with court support, so we're supporting people going through the court to access the Queensland Domestic and Family Violence Protection Order Act. We provide counselling, crisis counselling, safety upgrades, safety planning. Safety is a first priority in everything that we do within the service. We take students on placement and we grow their capacity to understand the domestic violence sector and to understand feminism as well. And we either, they either get employment with us, or when they go on to employment in a range of other organisations, they can always carry that education with them, that awareness about domestic violence with them. I think one of the things I really am proud about this service for is that we do build capacity in our workers, in our community, in the students, and it really is part of everything we do.
Now, Pauline, you mentioned before that in the interview process, one of the things the interviewers were concerned about was the fact that you had never, you'd worked at the Women's Centre, which was a male-free zone, and your management committee here definitely wanted to have men involved. So what has it been like? I'd like you to just tell us a bit more about that. You have men on the management group, men on staff, male clients. Tell us a bit about that.
I'm not sure exactly what was driving the philosophy or ideas or analysis of the management committee at that time, 20 years ago. But one of the things that we did do that was really quite obvious when you work in the domestic violence field is that we can do all sorts of support and help and safety planning with victims. We can assist the children who are traumatised, the intergenerational transmission of domestic violence as it's called. We can do all of those things, but we really need to go to the source. We really need to do something about the men who are using their violence. So as you can imagine, in the very early days of setting up a women's service, they were fairly radical ideas and they weren't very well accepted, and certainly men's programs for men were not funded. However, I was lucky enough to have the experience to go to Hamilton in New Zealand, who were rolling out the Duluth model for responding to perpetrator behaviour change programs. And so I did my placement for my university degree over in Hamilton and was really exposed to that side of the program, the way that they worked with women, the way women victims were supported by women advocates, but the programs that worked and challenged the men with their use of violence and taught them tools of different ways to behave. And I really loved the program and was able to come back to the fairly new domestic violence service and say, I think we should do this. So it may not be what the original management committee had in mind, but it was certainly how we've developed and still continue today. But here in Queensland now, men's behaviour change programs are funded, and there's a lot of philosophy around needing to respond to men who use the violence, but never about taking resources away from the women and children victims who need the resources the most. So we've been able to walk a nice line between those two things, I think. And as a feminist organisation, employing male workers means that your interviews have a bit of a different dimension to them. So when you're seeking someone with good values and good understanding and good work ethics and so on, you're always wanting to know, how are they going to fit into a feminist organisation? What do they understand that feminism means? How will they behave? How will they behave within the staff team, for example? Are they able to give up some of the socialised behaviours of maybe always opening the doors or wanting to shake hands with everybody and those sorts of attitudes? So it's been a very lively and evolving ways of working, that it's not a finished journey. We learn more and more from everybody who works here, and that from the experience that we gain from doing the work that we do. So it's very much an evolving process. And now that the Queensland Task Force report recommendations are out, we're going to be facing and looking forward to more radical change about really working actively to stop the violence, to stop the domestic violence that's going on in our community. We're going to be part of that.
Well, you seem really proud of this service, Pauline, and of your team of workers. I'm interested to know what it is about the North Queensland Domestic Violence Resource Service that you consider makes your service unique.
I think the first thing to emphasise is that this service absolutely focuses on the needs of the clients, the people who come to us for help. And so that may not be unique, but that's really a very strong and high focus of the workers who come to work every day. And that, I think, leads to a very strong staff team. And then we start to get into some of the unique aspects of this service. I think where each worker has their own particular specialist area of work, such as the children's counselling or the men's behaviour change program or the court support, but they all make up a team that gets involved with the day-to-day running of the service. They multitask, they pick up each other's work, they help each other out. There's a great camaraderie, but also a shared commitment between all of the staff team members. And I think that can be seen as unique. There's this view that if you put workers together in a hothouse situation and they're under stress and perhaps there's more women than men, and that they're not going to get on. But that's never been a feature of this organisation in 20 years. It is mostly that people feel so committed and so passionate about what they do that they respect that passion and commitment in their colleagues in the work team. And so everything does work in a very, I think, smooth and focused and committed and passionate way. I think our feminist analysis helps the staff team as well. It helps with resilience, it helps with the work that we do. It always amazes me that our workers get up in the morning and they go into the bathroom and they do their hair and they get ready for the day and they pack their lunch and they leave their house and they come to this workplace, and then they spend the day dealing with issues that are pretty shocking. They're dealing with stories of hurt and pain experienced by women and children. They're dealing with men who deny what they've been doing to their partners and to their children, and who sometimes set themselves up by saying, well, I'm the victim here. So these workers come to work every day dealing with some of the things that other people would find horrific. And these workers work from a basis that says, I'm listening to you, I believe you, I will support and help you with deciding what options work best for you, empowering the clients that come here. And so I think those sorts of things, the attitudes that we hold here and the energy that we hold here, make this place unique and makes it the vibrant, flexible and well-reputed organisation that it is. So the workers do a range of things. So there is the court support with 3 workers up at the court 3 times a week working in that environment of the court processes. There's workers who work with the men's behaviour change program, and they have to intersect with all of the organisations around, such as probation and parole and the police and so on. This part of that program is a woman's advocate who contacts all the women to say, your partner's in a group, we want to check on your safety and how you're going and what can we do to help. The children's program, where the primary caregiver, usually the mother, is supported in her own right and the children are supported, but then that family team is also supported to understand each other and to help each other heal and to close any gaps that sometimes the perpetrator has driven a wedge between the mother and the kids. So there's really very serious and excellent work that's done, but it's done by people who really believe in what they're doing, and they expect and get the outcomes of people being safer, for people feeling empowered, for people being respected, people being listened to. And that does include the perpetrators as well. They're treated with great respect. But underpinning that is our belief that the violence is learned and can be unlearned. And if you just, if we can just get you to interact with us and to learn the lessons that you need to learn, we can make a real difference in the men's lives as well. So I think that's things like that that make this place unique. I think it's also a helpful thing though to have one coordinator for 20 years. Most of the workers are here for many, many years. Some of our workers leave and then come back. That's not unusual. We're a garrison town here. It's not unusual for a husband to be transferred to another town and our worker goes along, and then the transfer happens back here and our worker bounces back, and so that's another thing we take great pride in. And I think I mentioned before about our students. Often we employ those students, or they're connected to us in a whole range of ways. So all of those things, I think, make us unique. We're clearly an articulated service in a place that encourages people to be part of us in really respectful ways. And that's what we reap. We sow that attitude and we reap that attitude back.
Well, that's so good, Pauline. Thank you. Now, in our fifth and final interview, I'll be asking Pauline to comment on the broader situation in Australia. What's happening in other states and territories, what's happening in different communities in Australia regarding the response to domestic and family violence. And of course there will be a chance for musing about the future. So I hope you'll join us for our fifth interview.